I would like to go on or to add to Eva's text. Is it working? Yeah. Actually, I would like to pick up this idea which begins with a kind of personification, as she calls it, or an odd personification. What does art know? And think further, what does this mean for the production? What does it mean, for example, for the production of images? And more precisely, I would like to focus on the role of the camera in our common work. I have put together a few fragments of, I think, 4 of our films that I think are interesting to go into this question of the camera, not personified, but if you go on with the idea of personification and understand the camera as an actor, which means also which means basically a kind of a shift of roles between the elements that are part of a production, in this case, of a production of a film. What happens if you give elements that are not actors attributes of an actor, or the possibility to play a role which is not a role of an object? And this means that it involves somehow giving up a certain control as the one who is using the medium, or using these means of articulation. And this is a kind of parallel to what Eva mentioned before concerning the difference between using language for describing something, which is a process where, let's say, you have a certain idea in your mind, you first cook it in your mind and then you put it into language, and the other way that she rather proposes which is language as a mean of performing a thought, which, as she described it in terms of with the example of Kleist, where you form a thought while speaking. So, in a way, there is a certain equivalence. Can a camera form a scene while the scene is going on, or while is it taking this scene? And what is the difference between such way of working to a way of working where you say, okay, this is what I want this scene to represent, and for this I will choose this camera position, and it focuses on this or that protagonist from this and that angle. So, okay, basically that's a short introduction. We will go through these fragments, and perhaps I will add little information to each of these projects because they are very different. They are from, as I said, from different films. We will start with a fragment from the film documentary Credit that we did in 1998. It was shot mainly in Israel and in occupied territories, or territories of the Palestinian Authority. And this sequence that is in the beginning of the film, somehow could mark a certain way of our work with the camera, or a certain beginning of our way to work with the camera, because we actually happened to be in this place. We arrived there on the way to somewhere else, and we saw that it looks like a camp, and there is a fence around, and we just say, okay, let's get in and see what's there. And there is a gate, and immediately we realize that we are not directly welcome to enter, and not at all to film. But somehow we managed to enter, and we were kind of, before we thought, oh, before this guard is changing his mind, let's just go on. And in a kind of a mutual agreement, which was not verbal really much, I started to drive, and Eva switched the camera on, and I thought, okay, we're not looking for something specific here. We happen to be here, and we find something intriguing. So I will just do a kind of choreography with the car, and Eva switched on the camera, and then the car turned out to be our tripod. And let's have a look at this sequence. second clip is from a short film that we did for an exhibition in Amsterdam. just can't recall the name of the exhibition. Smooth Space. And this exhibition was taking place in the Brakechond, in the theater place. And in this theater place, which is where theater pieces also are performed, there is this ceiling that you often have in theater places, which is moving up and down for adjusting the lighting. And we decided to work with this ceiling, and in a way we were kind of in a way we were directing the ceiling, or we were directing the engineer, the technician that was during the shot was moving the ceiling in a certain way, and we had a couple of dancers and mirrors. This will be seen. Let's have a look at it. The dancer is holding the camera. I mean, that's a presentation, so I tell you everything. The next clip that I would like to show is actually not a clip of a film, it's rather a documentation footage of a project that I did in Leuven, in the government building of Flemish Brabant. Sometimes in the mid-90s, the Brabant province has decided that they have to split into French Brabant and Flemish Brabant. And as soon as this political decision was taken, they started with this government building for Flemish Brabant, and immediately after a book was published with the history of Flemish Brabant, it goes back hundreds of years. So it was a kind of picking up a tradition, but in a way deciding that now, as it says in this book, we will trace the border of Flemish Brabant along the villages where Flemish is spoken. So defining, in a way, a province by language, which seemed to be, to me, rather absurd in itself, but also at this time of the late 20th century. And yeah, what I proposed was I checked with the integration center of the province how many nationalities are actually living in this province, from which nationalities the inhabitants are. And it turned out that it's about 121 different nationalities. And I had the name of the province translated into these 100 and something languages. And basically I I understood it as installing a sign for the new government building saying the name of the province. Okay, that's a little background to it. This sign is, the name of the province in these 120 languages is in a computer, and it's being generated by sensors. As soon as people enter or exit the building, the language changes. What was for me important, and why I bring it into here, is that the spatial relation between the sensor and these signs is such that when you do this daily act of entering a building, you're not aware that you might generate something. But in this case, you do generate something. You don't know which language you're generating, but you generate a change in language. And this was interesting for me here in this sequence as a kind of image production that involves public and not really concern a specific knowledge of or awareness of what you're doing. And especially this was interesting for me with images. There is sound on it, it's not really important, but of course, as this is the government building, there was very much a question of representation in the air, on the table, because according to the way this is programmed, the last person who exits the building in the afternoon generates the last language, and no one knows which one it will be. So it might be that for the night, the government building has a sign, let's say, in another language, not in Flemish, and this was a bit of a problem for them, since this is the representation of building of the province. And they did ask if it was possible to program in such a way that the Flemish language would come a bit more often. But yeah, I think this is just a little anecdote, but I think that a lot of what Eva and I are doing with the camera or in the film has much to do with this, actually with looking for other models than the model of representation. And I think that this has a lot to do with the way you claim a certain knowledge to represent something that you have to say. We will end this little clip row with a sequence from Flash Forward, which is our last film from 2004. Yeah, this film has an elaborate soundtrack and text track, and therefore I would perhaps save the introduction and let you see it. Okay,